My parents divorced when I was 4. I was their youngest child at that point. My brother was 10 and my sister was 8. 2 years later our mom remarried. I believe my stepdad thought he would inherit at least one child to call his own out of the marriage. My siblings were older and not too happy about our stepdad. Something about him they simply didn't like. With me, I had no issue with him going in, but he made everything such a competition. He wanted to do everything my dad did. Would ask to go instead of my dad to certain dad things, Father's Day events, father-kid sports stuff. And when I said no he would tell me I was hurting his feelings. My dad was bothered by the whole going instead of stuff. He offered for him to come with us a time or two, but that promptly stopped when he tried to take my dad's place at some of those events. When I was 12 my mom was in the UK for a work thing and I was at my dad's the whole time. I ended up getting sick. My stepdad showed up a few hours in. When my mom had contacted him, dad contacted her and he tried to tell my dad to leave so he could take over. I begged dad not to go, said I needed him, and the hurt my stepdad expressed to me was so deep. My dad told him not to put his feelings on me. He said I was big enough to understand that rejecting him as a dad hurt. It almost kicked off, but my dad just asked a nurse to remove my stepdad. He showed up 2 days later when I was still in the hospital and asked me if I would go to his and my mom's for him to take care of me. I said I didn't want to. Again he expressed I was breaking his heart and why did I always choose my dad over him? He was my dad too. I told my mom about it. She said it was a blessing to have 2 dads and I should treat him more as a dad than as a step because he was trying his hardest. When I was 14 she really emphasized that with me because they had suffered 2 miscarriages and a stillbirth and she was no longer able to have kids after it. She said he only ever wanted to be a dad and that he had always loved me and it would be good for him to be loved back just as hard. Afterward, it was too much and I chose to live with my dad and visit my mom and stepdad. And now it's been several more years. I'm 26 and he still tries to compete. He asked me directly the other night why I chose to ask my dad to walk me down the aisle at my wedding, getting married this November. And I told him because he's my dad. He started to interrupt, but I cut him off and told him to stop. It was never a competition between them because my dad has always been and always will be my dad and he was never going to win against him. He lost it and told me it was obviously a competition because he never got treated the same or loved the same and it's a slap in the face because he is just as much my dad as my dad is. My mom is pissed at how I spoke to him too. Am I the idiot? I touched on it in the post, but my dad on occasion did try to include stepdad in some stuff. He never came. And then it stopped when stepdad tried to push dad out of stuff so he could do it alone. Always Father's Day stuff too or stuff relating to father-kid things. Not the idiot. I'm a stepmom. I would never, ever insist that any of my stepkids put me in a role they weren't comfortable with. They started referring to me in mom titles way before I did. Your dad is your dad. People who tried to take that over guilt you for not denying that, especially when you had a fully present dad in your life, are terrible, and this is 100% on them. All the miscarriage shaming? Gross. All the telling you that you needed to treat this person who wasn't your dad like he was your dad? Gross. He doesn't get to take over for your bio dad because he doesn't have bio kids of his own. It makes me sad because the step-parent-step-kid relationship can be great. Meaningful, funny, heartfelt, frustrating, and everything else all at once. But it can be that without trying to equate yourself to a parent you aren't. Not the idiot. He is being ridiculous, and your mother should have told him to wind his neck years ago. OP, I often wonder if my mom hoped all 3 of us would fall in love with him and call him dad and choose to be a family with them over our dad. That might sound like I'm a really suspicious person, but she never took what I said about it seriously and always tried to encourage I see him as a dad. And I know she fought my siblings on their perceptions of him from the beginning. I, 33 have a large family. Mostly aunts and female cousins aside from mom, stepmom, stepsister, and grandmother. I don't know how to say this, but all those women I mentioned above are into teasing and joking. They formed a unit, which I admit is kind of toxic, and they tease and roast every new woman that enters the family by marriage by setting up tests to see if they deserve to be part of the family. Or roast their looks and styles to the point of breaking confidence and self-esteem down. Then after a few months of teasing they'd announce that they'd finally welcomed them into the family. The newest member would join in on the teasing too, which is crazy as my dad says. When I first introduced my then girlfriend, now wife, I made it clear that I didn't want any of the women in the unit to come at her or harass her, not even with a single word. They went behind my back and roasted her looks and job, and I discovered they'd been doing it on Facebook. I had them apologize for one by one after they gave the "we're just testing the water to see if she's capable to be part of the family" excuse. They didn't want to apologize, but once I said I wouldn't invite any of the units unless they apologize, including my mom, everyone immediately apologized and brought gifts for my wife. The first of them was my stepmom and my sil. My wedding was 2 weeks ago. There was talk about the women in the family wanting to pull a prank on my wife by wearing white and calling it the ultimate test to see how my wife react. My brother warned me, so I announced that if any one of them showed up in white, I'd have them kicked out, including mom. They said this wasn't true and they'd never do such a thing. But they showed up to my wedding one by one wearing white dresses, and each one of them was told to leave after they tried giving excuses by either making scenes or getting the men involved. The senior women of the unit, who are mom and aunts, also showed up in white but refused to leave. I threatened to take harsher action, and mom was pissed, telling me to step aside, but I didn't let her in. I had her leave while the men in the family were watching stunned. Dad was on my side and supported me a lot. I felt absolutely awful because my wedding was being interrupted by them making scenes. My wife was hurt beyond measure, but the women in the family were pissed. My cousin blasted me on social media later, saying I excluded all the women from the wedding because my wife was so insecure she couldn't handle another woman's presence at her wedding. I had an argument with them, and mom berated me, saying it was supposed to be a prank, but I said they were taking it too far. Mom said I took it too far by kicking them out because they were trying to get a reaction from my wife to see if she was one of those Britazillas and were going to change soon as the prank was over, but I ruined my own and entire wedding by reacting so aggressively. I stopped talking after she said I had to bring my wife and apologize. I haven't seen a lot of them in 2 weeks and they've excluded me from everything. Was I the idiot for how I handled this? I just want to explain that, A, this has been happening for years. The men in the family are split on this behavior. Some of them encourage it, like my uncle and my cousin's husbands, one is now an ex, and some are against it, like me and my dad and brother. B, the women claim that there's nothing hurtful in what they do because they claim they're just looking out for us men and that their goal ultimately is to make sure the women who enter the family are decent. C, my dad always ends up arguing with my mom and grandmother since they're the ones who started this whole thing with their behavior and attitude toward other women. D, and I'm not sure if I should mention this, but my male cousin, who's a middle schooler, said he'd make sure to leave the country before even meeting any woman because of this, and it made me chuckle. Also, the dresses they showed up in were simple white dresses, nothing over the top, but still were white dresses. I realized they went ahead with their plans even after I stated what I'd do in that case. Not the idiot, your family is toxic and I am so sad for your wife that they would do that, but also so happy for her that she has a husband who will support her and have her back. I'm sorry your family tried to hijack your wedding for a power play, but you did the right thing and your marriage will be stronger because of it. Can you imagine how the wife's family thought about all of this? If I were the mother of OP's wife, I would be really worried about my daughter being around those women. Good on OP for breaking the cycle. Not the idiot. Not the idiot. This level of hazing has crossed the line to emotional abuse, blackmail. And that is probably understating it. It's very good you stood up for your spouse. You handled it well, but emotional blackmailers use family to pressure the victims into compliance with the abuse. Most often when standing up to familial emotional blackmailers, it ends with forced no contact for non-compliance. No contact is healthier, but it can be hard to be shunned by the family.